What's going on, everybody? Marcus Havoc here, back again with some quick Legion news. Fatbosstv, God bless him, did an interview with Ion Hazzikostas at Gamescom earlier today. It'll be tomorrow for most of you, or the day after. And he gave us a lot of clarification on a lot of the things that are coming for Legion. One of those is, of course, patch 7.1, introducing Karazhan as a mega dungeon, 5-man only, mythic. It's going to feel like a 5-man raid, and I couldn't be happier with it. And we're also getting a small raid in between Emerald Nightmare and the Nighthold. The reason that was explained was that Blackrock Foundry came out a little bit too soon in comparison to when Highmaul was released. I felt it was a little too soon. My guild only had about 3 weeks to farm it before Blackrock Foundry came out. The greatest part about this is the fact that early 2017 is the Nighthold release date, and we get 3 weeks after launch to step into Emerald Nightmare. The greatest part about this is 7.1 is already released. Well, not already released, already announced. We're getting the dungeon, we're getting a raid, we're getting small quests. This is awesome, steady stream of content. I could not be happier with this announcement, and I couldn't be happier with the fact that the Nighthold is going to come out probably around January, maybe early February of 2017. It's the best thing that's probably could happen to us in terms of knowing when the schedules are going to come out. They're being very, very open and transparent about what their schedule is and what their plans are. A couple of other things that came out was they talked about a lot about Mythic dungeons and Mythic Plus dungeons, and the fact that they're going to drop some heroic Nighthold gear if you're completing high keystones. So it looks like Mythic dungeons are going to be a great asset to a lot of players that can't seem to get into raids right away, or need some catch-up gear, or just want to push the envelope and get more gear. So I'm really, really happy with the announcements they made on Mythic Plus dungeons. Legendary items. As all of you know, I'm not the biggest fan of how they're doing legendary items in Legion, but at the very least, hopefully everyone can get a piece of that action. So I'm glad that, one, they're going to add more, and two, they're not going to be necessarily just for raiders. So hopefully they don't become too much of a problem. Not the biggest fan of them, but hey, what can you do? Another quick tidbit that they talked about was the ability pruning. Now, the ability pruning is something that I am a big fan of. And once again, Ion Hazzikostas is he's giving us little clues here during this interview. He gives us a clue that the reason why we're pruning stuff is so we can add new things later. And I think that's really, really important, because you don't want classes to feel homogenized. And that's really what's been happening throughout World of Warcraft. Classes just felt homogenized. Oh, we need to give everybody a speed boost. We need to give everybody a heal cooldown. Back in Siege of Orgrimmar, you had feral druids tranking, which just made absolutely no sense. So I really do appreciate what they're doing with the ability pruning. I think it's the right thing to do. And I think that he's sending us a clue that, hey, there's going to be new stuff coming up later for your class. Looks like they have a long-term goals for every class, and I think this Legion prune and this Legion revamp is the foundation of that. Another key thing that they talked about was expansion launch issues. As you all know, Warlords of Draenor had the worst expansion launch in the history of video gaming, in my opinion. In fact, it was a social media frenzy how bad it was, and it just put it just left a bad taste in so many people's mouths that the expansion it couldn't recover from that type of a launch. And it's the 6 P's. Proper planning prevents piss poor performance, and with Legion, they've already done that. They've made it so you don't have to start in a certain level. Not everyone's going to be bottlenecked into one zone. And they also announced something here, because I raid on US-Sargeras, which is one of the most populated realms in North America. And they talked about how under heavy load, there will be multiple versions of the same zone on the same server. So that way it flows well. And with all of this being said, it seems like the only thing that can hamper the Legion launch is some kind of DDoS attack from some stupid little hacker punks. Don't get me started on that. So now that we have a lot of this news and a lot of things clarified, I kind of want to address what's kind of coming in store for Legion and kind of my perception of what they're doing. What they're doing in Legion is simple. They're starting to build a foundation for the new WoW. They're building the foundation of, okay, every class is going to feel different. Every class is going to have their own weapon, and we're setting the stones so that way we can build this big giant house as we move on. So I think every expansion after Legion is going to be one that just builds off what they're doing here. I think the artifact weapon system might become a mainstay in World of Warcraft. I think it's an awesome system. It doesn't have to be artifacts next expansion. Maybe they can forge their own weapon. And they're also sticking to a raid structure that works. 20-man mythic raiding works. Flexible, normal, and heroic works. And like I said before, Raid Finder is dropping tier again, and they did a pretty good reason. A lot of you know my opinion on what they did to LFR back in Warlords. They backpedal. Ion basically backpedals right here. If you've been unlucky and you want your set bonus, it gives you another chance to go get that last piece. I think they get it now. I think they get it that, hey, players want that opportunity to go into LFR and get it. Yes, LFR is a cesspool, but at the very least, it can be a useful tool, whether to learn your class, play an alt, get some tier on your alt, or get your last piece on your last tier. And he says it right here, that the team probably overdid this in Warlords. Once again, they're starting to realize their mistakes, and that's the Legion philosophy. They're saying, okay, we threw some shit on the wall, most of it didn't stick. Now we know what we have to do forward. We're getting a steady stream of content. We're getting all of these things being presented to us and they're laying out the storyboard. They're saying, okay, here's patch 7.1. The expansion hasn't even launched yet, and we already know what patch 7.1 is. We already know when the next raid's probably going to come out. We already know we're getting a little small raid to kind of whet our appetites in between Emerald Nightmare and Nighthold. It's one tier. A little tiny raid in between one tier. That's fantastic. So overall, this was probably one of the best interviews I think that members of the WoW community have done with Ion Hazzikostas. I have strong opinions on what to ask people. I used to be, for a lot of you who don't know, I used to be a journalist, both in college and somewhat as a professional in the mixed martial arts world. And I know what you need to ask to get that your audience wants. You need to ask questions that your audience wants to hear. And Fatboss just did a fantastic job with this Q&A. They got all the relevant info that all of us wanted to hear. So in closing, I think that this is a fantastic clarification interview with a lot of good info coming in. And Legion hype train, baby. Chew, chew. Let's do it. This is Marcus Havoc, and I'll see you guys later.